Good morning. Wow, that echoes. Can everybody hear me in the back? Hopefully. Not too much echo reverb. Cheers. So good morning, and thank you for making the trek at 9 a.m. this morning to come to the Ignite session focused on enterprise browser management for Windows 10. My name is Dean King-Smith, and I'm the program manager, one of the program managers responsible for enterprise browsing. So with that, today we're going to be talking about management. By management, I mean management of Microsoft Edge, management of IE 11, and management of both Microsoft Edge and IE 11 on Windows 10. But before we get started, just want to give you guys a quick recap of what we have available this week from the enterprise browser team. Hopefully some of you caught the sessions earlier around Microsoft Edge, and also our enterprise browsing roadmap. Today we'll be talking about the management piece, and tomorrow we'll be talking about enterprise mode for Internet Explorer. If you have existing line of business apps, we also have office hours on, today's Wednesday, tomorrow, all day. So you can bring your line of business apps by, we can do a quick debugging and figure out what's going on with them. So let's talk about Windows 10. As you know, we have Microsoft Edge, our brand new browser for Windows 10, positioned as software as a service, always up to date, always running the latest and greatest, a lightweight, great modern browser. We also have Internet Explorer 11, which is software as a product. Uses a traditional software model on receiving updates and making sure it maintains compatibility with your line of business apps. And since we're talking about management, one of the gurus of management is Jack Welch. And one of my favorite quotes from Jack was, management is about it's all about managing in the short term while developing plans for the long term. At Microsoft and with the enterprise browsing team, that's exactly what we're doing. We're thinking about the long-term management story for Microsoft Edge while making sure we have a great management story for Internet Explorer 11. This quote and this ethos has embodied our team and led us to the following browser management tenets. First of all, we want to make sure we have an optimized policy for Microsoft Edge. What that means is we want to make sure that the policy that we deliver to the IT pros actually makes sense. Not to say the current one doesn't, but we want to make sure that this one is tailored for Microsoft Edge, tailored for the new experiences that Microsoft Edge provides. Secondly, we want to make sure that Microsoft Edge is easy to configure, and we'll talk about both of these in depth shortly. Next, IE 11 is the same on Windows 10 as it is for Windows 8.1 and Windows 7. So we also want to ensure that there's a consistent management experience across all of the OSs that IE 11 runs on. And of course, with that, a consistent policy set for every OS that IE 11 runs on. And last but not necessarily last, but now that this is the first time that we are shipping both browsers, we want to make sure we have a tight integration between Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer 11. And last but not least, we want to make sure we reduce management overhead where possible. Management is something you have to do. It's not necessarily something you want to do. So where there might be cost savings that we can introduce or reduce pain, if you will, we want to see what we can do in Windows 10 to help out with that. So today, as I mentioned, what we're going to cover is Internet Explorer 11, Microsoft Edge, and then spend some time talking about Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer 11 together. So let's start with Internet Explorer 11. It's a really short section because there's literally only two things that I want you to leave here with. First and foremost, there is no change in managing Internet Explorer 11 on Windows 10 versus Internet Explorer 11 on any other operating system that IE 11 runs on. Absolutely zero change. The tools, the processes, everything that you already are using today to manage IE 11 on Windows 7 or Windows 8.1 will directly carry over to Windows 10. So we take a step back and think about what that means. From our viewpoint, there's effectively pretty much 4 stages. You configure your browser, you deploy your browser, you manage your browser, and then you service it with updates and security patches. For configuration, a lot of people use IEAK. Actually, before I say a lot, how many people in the room currently use IEAK to configure or deploy? It's about somewhere between a third and a half. Good information. Hold on to that because we're going to come back to IEAK. We also see customers using group policy and group policy preferences to preset configurations for their browser. From a deployment point, you can use System Center to deploy your browser, or literally any other package delivery endpoint management solution. On a direct management, IE11 provides more than 1,650 individual group policies available to configure IE. And last but not least, servicing. System Center, Windows Software Update Service, and our recently announced Windows Update for Business all are different ways that you can service IE11. But before we continue, let's talk about the IEAK in Windows 10. Now, Internet Explorer 11 ships with Windows 10, so there is no deployment. If you upgrade to Windows 10, you will have the latest and greatest version of IE11. That includes enterprise mode. That includes all of the backwards compatibility and legacy compatibility features that come with IE11 today. So if you're using IEAK, all you're actually going to be creating is a configuration file. Now, using the same IEAK that you can use today for IE11 on Windows 8.1 also works on Windows 10. So no need to upgrade your tooling in this respect. But the key caveat I want to call out here is that, again, you're making a configuration file, not actually making a package to deploy, since it's already built into the OS. From your options, most already are there. The only exception is user agent string. You will not have the ability to append the user agent string in Windows 10. That is a change. So it's one thing to talk about this, but let me actually show you on a live build of Windows 10 what your policies look like. 6. There we go. So this is running the latest Windows Insider preview, and let's just launch GPEdit. And those of you familiar with group policy know this tool very well, I'm sure. So we'll go to Administrative Templates, Windows Components, and all the way down to Internet Explorer. Immediately, if you see all of the settings that you're already used to in Windows 7 running in Windows 10 right now. You can manage IE in Windows 10. There is no change. It's actually already in code, so please feel free to try it out. So to recap, key things to remember. All your existing tools already work. There's a common management experience across every supported operating system that IE11 runs on. And last but not least, one thing I do want to throw out there, we are still investing in Internet Explorer. We'll talk at length tomorrow about enterprise mode for IE11 and some of the new features, family of features that we've built into enterprise mode. With that, we want to make sure that these features are manageable via policy and via group policy. So we will add new policies as needed to support these features. So that's IE11 in a nutshell. No change. Yay. This should be clapping. Like there's no additional overhead. Yeah, that's right. Good morning. So next, I'm sure the topic that everybody's super excited to find out about, how do you manage Microsoft Edge in the enterprise? Who wants to know? 90% of the room. I love it. So I got a captive audience this morning. That's great. So you've probably seen this slide before, but Microsoft Edge, as we think about in a world where every browser should be able to render all of your content, it's the right time for Microsoft to build a new browser. We want to make sure we enable new experiences. Think about annotation, Cortana, things of that nature. We built out a brand new rendering engine in Edge HTML that renders content that's interoperable with Chrome and Firefox. And if you went to my colleague Fred's presentation the first 2 days of the conference, you know all about this already. If not, please feel free to take a look at it online once it gets posted. And last but not least, we want to make sure that Microsoft Edge works great with Internet Explorer, so you get both interoperability and compatibility. Thinking back to the Jack Welch quote, this is where we're heading long term. So let's talk about how you manage it. This browser represents a break from the past. Everything that we're doing with Microsoft Edge is brand new. But with that, it also presents an interesting opportunity. How do we improve this management experience? And like any good quality engineering organization, we're driven by data. So my engineering team and I, we sat back and looked at all of our data, how policies are managed, how many policies, and let's share what we found. This is the group policy curve. If you notice, it doesn't go down at all. It keeps going up. And I'm not sure what, in 2005, you can see a huge spike. One of the things that, from an engineering standpoint, our original philosophy was every time you added a checkbox, every time you added a feature, every time you added a pane, you need a group policy. It's kind of like Oprah. You have a feature, you get a group policy, and you get a group policy. But it's not really tenable, because every time we add a new group policy, this list keeps going, the large grows larger and larger and larger. And as we get to Internet Explorer 11, 1,600 and, correct me if I'm wrong, 63? 75, excuse me, soon to be 76 group policies is in Internet Explorer 11. Now, we've heard feedback from customers that every time they make a deployment change or take an update to IE 11, they actually sit down, one of my customers in particular, sits down and goes through all 1,673 of those group policies. It takes them 3 days, which is cost, which is time. We want to see what we can do to make that better. So we have 1,675 group policies. Let's look at usage. For those who are participating in the TAP program, we really appreciate your participation. You helped us get this better picture. We realized that roughly 43 to 45% of policies, both machine and user policies, aren't being used at all. And this is a survey of about 100 customers participating in our technical adoption preview program for Windows 10. So we said, wow, we're not even using all 1,600, so we know we can do better. So how do we take advantage of this opportunity? Well, first and foremost, let's wipe the slate clean and have zero assumptions of what managing should look like. Let's also look at what Windows 10 is doing with management all up. MDM, lightweight management options, but also keeping an eye, again, on what's in the short term with maintaining group policy functionality. So let's talk about Microsoft Edge management. So you notice we're going to use the same framework we used to describe Internet Explorer 11. So when we talk about configuring, new for Microsoft Edge is that you will be able to configure Microsoft Edge using group policy and MDM. And we'll talk about what MDM is in a second. Interestingly enough, you can also manage Microsoft Edge using group policy and MDM. So when we think about configuration, deployment, management, and service, you know what? We're going to go ahead and group these two together. It doesn't make sense to configure a browser with one tool, then have to use a completely separate process to manage it on day-to-day. So all of you who raise your hand that use the IEAK to manage IE 11, you don't have to do that anymore. You have a single place to both configure and manage your browser. So we put those in a bucket. Let's talk about deployment. So deployment of Microsoft Edge is easy. It comes pre-installed with Windows 10. You deploy Windows 10, you deploy Microsoft Edge. And when we think about servicing, Microsoft Edge, again, is software as a service, so it's always up to date. So we put both of those in a bucket. So now we have configuration and management as one experience, and deployment and servicing effectively as another experience. So let's dive a little bit into configuration and management. We have a set of browser policies, and I'll share what that initial set looks like. But let's start with a set of browser policies. Majority of you are likely using group policy today, so that'll be there. You have a brand new policy set for Microsoft Edge, and that'll use your existing GPO, group policy preferences, or SCCM infrastructure, depending on what's your favorite group policy management. We're also enabling MDM. Now, MDM is a brand new policy option for Windows 10, and one thing to keep in mind is every policy we make available for Microsoft Edge will work both with MDM and group policy. There's full parity between the two. One of the cool things about MDM, and we'll actually talk about very shortly, cross-platform, cross-OS. So you can use Intune to manage not only Windows 10 and Microsoft Edge, but also use Intune to manage iOS devices and Android devices. And it's standards-based, so it's great interoperability between multiple management suites. And last but not least, pick your favorite flavor, and then you ultimately end up with a managed version of Microsoft Edge. It's the slide you want to take a picture of if you're taking pictures. So if you're not familiar with mobile device management, here's a quick primer. Windows 10, again, supports mobile device management natively. It is cross-platform. It's a very light management solution that allows you to do a number of things, from device enrollment to configuration management to app management, remote inventory and assistance, all without requiring a device to be domain joined. So you can think about this as perfect for that BYOD scenario, where you have a contractor or a vendor who's only on site permanently and you don't want to add their device to the domain. You can quickly enroll them in a MDM-based service, and you'll still have the full suite of management capabilities, particularly for Microsoft Edge. So let's talk about policies. So I mentioned earlier, in previous years, we took a feature-based approach. Every checkbox, every pane, everything had an option. For Windows 10, our approach for managing Microsoft Edge is scenario-driven. As we light up new scenarios and new capabilities and new functionality, Cortana, for example, annotations, because my two favorite features, we'll have policies designed to manage and control those scenarios. Our policies will be consistent across devices, whether you're using Microsoft Edge on a mobile device, whether you're using Microsoft Edge on a tablet, a desktop, something that we haven't built yet, which I can't talk about. Pick what you want. If it runs Microsoft Edge, you will have the same policy set available. There's two caveats to that, and I'll talk about those in a second. And last but not least, group policy and MDM have pure parity. So let's talk about policies. When Windows 10 is released later this summer, this is the initial policy set that will be included. Now, I must add this right now, because I know you're thinking, this is not a lot. Microsoft Edge is software as a service. So these policy sets will grow over time, and the next slide will talk about what we're thinking for the future. But initially, we know compatibility is important, so we're going to have a policy that enables you to configure the compatibility settings. Send intranet to IE, we'll talk about in the next section around how IE and Microsoft Edge work great together. One thing that's mobile specific is allow browser. If you've managed Windows Phone 8 or Windows Phone 8.1, you're familiar with the setting, allows you to disable the browser. Pop-up content restrictions around pop-ups, cookies, smart screen, active scripting, things along those lines. You can configure home pages, do not track. This is an initial set of policies that we actually built and prioritized based on feedback from our partners and also from the TAP program. So thanks for being part of the TAP program. And also Windows Insiders. I've had conversations with a few of you in this room and ran past our entire list. And this is the initial prioritization, but thing to keep in mind, this is only the beginning. There we go. So we're considering a number of future policies, again, still scenario-driven, but also forward-looking. As we think about what additional features that we want to light up in Microsoft Edge, we were also in tandem thinking about what policies we want to make available. And all this is feedback-driven. We're real data-centric. We want to please come up at the end and tell me what you think about what you saw on the last slide and what you're about to see on this slide, and give us that feedback. We want to make sure that we're delivering the right set of scenario-driven policies for you. Things that we're thinking about, disabling the compatibility view functionality, which is one of the potential triggers for how to get to Internet Explorer. Content, allow extensions, PDF. We announced our extension plan last week at Build. We want to make sure you have the ability to disable that. If you don't want your end users using the Pinterest plugin, you can control that. And then all of these we plan on making available soon with the next major update to Microsoft Edge. So we talked about configuration and management, so let's talk about deployment and servicing. It's pretty straightforward, actually. It ships with Windows 10, and this is the default browser. There's nothing to deploy. You upgrade to Windows 10, you get Microsoft Edge. Simple enough. Now, servicing is where it gets a little bit fun. So as you know, we have Microsoft Edge as the browser. And with any browser, there's actually two components. You have the actual app, and you have the actual engine, edgehtml.dll. We're actually going to be servicing these separately. And the reason we're doing it separately is, one, your compatibility and interoperability that you're worried about, that's in the engine. We want to make sure you have ample time to test out these changes before you roll them out to your, end users. These meta features, as we like to describe them, Cortana, annotation, things along those lines, those are going to be serviced because Microsoft Edge is an app, serviced like any other app that ships with Windows 10. That app is always up to date, and as I mentioned, treated like a universal Windows app, and all the faculties that come with that, the enterprise store and so forth. For the platform, it's updated via Windows Update, WSUS, or Windows Update for Business. And again, still enables you to have time to test all of this and have confidence in any platform changes before they roll out. If you could hold your questions to the end, I'd appreciate it. We've heard a few questions pop up over our session so far this week. What about security updates? Depending on where that security update lies, whether it's in the platform or the app, it'll go through that respective channel. Now, to share kind of our rationale, our thinking about this update process, so you can also have confidence that by the time you get the package and you're ready to deploy it, it's been through millions and millions of self-host hours. This is how we ensure product quality in Windows 10 is via previews. So starting on the left, that's inside Microsoft, broad internal validation. The entire OSG team is actively testing this functionality. Then we scroll out to limited external flights. This is the Windows Insider program. This is our TAP program, effectively. Then we do broader external flights via Windows Insider. So you're thinking about several million users validating this code, giving feedback on it, finding issues, before it actually goes to our current branch, which is your consumer version, your consumer SKU of Windows that's always up to date, where we're actively pushing out updates. And last but not least, we'll consider this enterprise ready and make it available. This way, we're literally having hundreds of millions of individual users worldwide. If you ask Terry Myerson, we're shooting for 1 billion, that are validating every update. And as we get feedback from those, we'll make those changes and make sure we're as transparent as possible with what's happening with individual fixes, so you know which update to push down and when it's going to be available. So with Microsoft Edge, you have a simplified policy set, but with multiple management options vis-a-vis MDM or group policy. An app that's always up to date, using the latest and greatest productivity features. It is, after all, the browser for doing. And last but not least, web platform updates via Windows Update, Software Update Service, and Windows Update for Business. Now comes my favorite part of this talk. How does Microsoft Edge and IE11 work together? We have two browsers, and this is the first time in Microsoft's history where we shipped two browsers. And a wise program manager on my team always used to say, two browsers are better than one only when they work together and provide a better solution. Let's talk about that solution. So with Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer 11, there's two key things I want you to leave here with today to keep in mind. There are some common management settings. And secondly, there's a single entry point for end users. One of the biggest feedback points we've heard, if you're having two browsers, do I have to train my end users on which browser to use or how to use them? In Windows 10, as an IT pro, you will have that choice. You can standardize on IE11, which we expect a fair amount of you will do, because that'll expedite and speed your transition to Windows 10. Or you can standardize on Microsoft Edge, and you get to take advantage of the experience that I'm about to describe. So let's first talk about common management. Similar to, as we saw before, there are two parts of the app, two parts of each browser. You have the app and you have the platform. And with the app and the platform, of course, there's going to be browser-specific settings. You can think about this as settings control the Internet Explorer control panel for IE11, or settings that control Cortana annotation for Microsoft Edge. But in addition to that, there are platform-specific settings, proxy settings, Things that are specific for the platform layer, networking settings, things along those lines. When you set those for one browser, they apply to both. So let's talk about this single entry point. So let's say you assume to start with Microsoft Edge and set that as your default browser. Internet Explorer 11 can be configured as a compatibility fallback. And the great part about this is for those of you who are using enterprise mode for IE 11, hopefully most of you are. Anybody? Bueller? Right. If you're using enterprise mode for Internet Explorer, this functionality leverages your enterprise mode site list. And if you're not familiar with enterprise mode for IE 11, have a session tomorrow at this time, and we'll be talking about this in depth. If we think about IE 11 as your compatibility browser for all your legacy line of business apps, and we think about enterprise mode for IE 11 and everything that comes with enterprise mode as your way to ensure that legacy line of business apps are back at work with IE 11, this makes sense. The great thing with leveraging the enterprise mode site list is that it provides enterprise control. By default, all sites that exist on the enterprise mode site list will fall back to IE 11. And I'll show you that experience in a second. We're also providing a policy, so if you just didn't really want to deal with the enterprise mode site list, you can check a box, and everything that loads on your intranet will fall back to Internet Explorer 11. All of this is paired with the consumer experience, which actually leverages the Microsoft compatibility view list. Is the way we manage compatibility for the web worldwide. Any site that exists on the compatibility view list will also fall back to Internet Explorer 11. With each of these, since we know these are key features, there will be policies to control and manage all of this. So let's take a look at what this looks like. My niece made that for me. That does not come with Windows 10. So what I'm going to first show you is let's build out the scenario. Using your enterprise mode site list, you have a site that was added to the list, and an end user goes to that site. So for example, let's launch let's launch Microsoft Edge. Let's go to, let's see. redmondts.microsoft.com. If that actually works. Boom. Immediately, as soon as I launch the site, Microsoft Edge detects the sites as existing on my site list and automatically launches IE. No user interaction needed, no additional work, no additional thought for the user to worry about. If you set Microsoft Edge as your default browser, that link that they click on in their email, site-specific, depending on how you as an IT pro has set that site to open, or if you leverage your line of business apps developers to manage your enterprise mode site list, the site will automatically open in IE 11. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, okay, so that's there. What's an experience around if a site isn't on the enterprise mode site list? And what does that actually look like? Let's go to Bank of China. Now, this is a beta experience. You'll see it light up in upcoming Windows Insider flights. But we'll have an actual enterprise version of this page. This is the consumer experience right now. You'll see an option that says this site needs Internet Explorer. And at that point, the end user has a couple different options. They can check a box, which will make it sticky so that anytime they go back to that site, it'll open in Internet Explorer. Or quite frankly, they can continue going in, what's now Microsoft Edge. If they click, the site will continue, it'll launch, it'll continue navigating in Microsoft Edge. But what if they get to this and get to a site within the site that they navigated to and realize that there's something off or there's something not there? At that point, they can literally click and open with Internet Explorer. And the site will automatically launch IE and transfer whatever URL it was on directly to Internet Explorer. This is our fallback experience. This is how we want to ensure that your end users don't have this cognitive dissonance around which browser to use, and also ensure that you as an IT pro have full control over what that end experience looks like. Oh, whoops, forgot one piece. How do you manage all this? Also important. So for those of you familiar with Enterprise Mode Sitelist, know we ship a tool called the Enterprise Mode Sitelist Manager. And we've actually updated that tool to support this fallback and transition experience. Now again, this is a beta, and it's not finished, it's not final code, but I do want to give you guys a sense of what this experience looks like. So let's add a set of test sites. The Sitelist Manager will always validate your URLs to make sure that they're actually reachable. And you can always make changes there. But it loads an initial set of sites. Now what you'll see is in the right column, there's this IE11 question mark, not final text. But this is what we've been using internally to manage this list. And that question mark determines whether that site opens up in Internet Explorer 11. Now you notice by default all of these are checked. So if you have an existing Enterprise Mode site list, excuse me, if you load it into the updated tool, it will automatically set this value for every site. Now let's say, for example, I have our EHR sites, which is the top entry. When we made updates, let's say, for example, you made updates to your HR site, and now it works perfectly in Spartan. Let's go ahead and just uncheck this box. Now, when the user navigates to the EHR site, it'll just stay in Spartan. No pop-up, no this site needs Internet Explorer, no additional interference. They go straight to the site. But if they're going to the EHR site /SDA, it'll launch Internet Explorer 11. The same fine-grained, the same fine-grained control you currently have with Internet Explorer 11 with regards to Enterprise Mode, that transfers directly over to managing this compatibility fallback. And for those of you who have an eagle eye, I will actually just import it from XML. It's a feature we shipped last month, and we'll be talking about it tomorrow for Enterprise Mode and how that works with site discovery. Shameless plug. So let's go back to our slides. And I'm kind of excited because we're going to have a ton of time for questions, and I'm sure a lot of you already have. I mentioned this whole experience is manageable by policy. So you have three options. First of all, you can set Microsoft Edge to just go ahead and use the Enterprise Mode site list as defined by IE11. If you're familiar with Enterprise Mode, you know we make available a policy that lets you set the location in the Enterprise Mode site list. Using a similar, not the same, but a similar policy for Microsoft Edge, you can tell Edge just do what IE11 does. I don't want to do any extra work, just do what IE11 does. And this is actually the default setting for this. If you want to have differentiation between your site list that you use to manage compatibility on IE11 and the site list you use to manage the fallback experience on Microsoft Edge, you can specify a location of your own site list, or a separate site list, rather. And last but not least, if this feature is disabled or just simply not configured, Edge will not use any enterprise site list and fall back to the Microsoft compatibility view list as the default experience, which is what consumers will see. And as I showed you, we're updating the Enterprise Mode Site List Manager tool. Hope to have a beta available before RTM. All sites are enabled by default. So even if you load even if you load an existing Enterprise Mode site list and don't do anything else to it and don't care about compatibility, all the settings will already be there by default. And the key thing about this tool is that it continues to enable that fine-grained control of both the compatibility experience in IE11, but specifically now the fallback experience. So we think these are better together. You have a single entry point for end users. As an IT pro, you have control of which sites load in which browser. And we're leveraging your existing investments in Enterprise Mode to make this possible. Now, we have a lot of time for questions, and I'm happy to take any, but did want to share, we have a few more sessions coming up this week. Click. There we go. Tomorrow, we have an enterprise mode deep dive and also a talk on the security positioning of our browser. And also an app compat workshop as well. And last but not least, a drop-in session. So if you have any actual problems with your line of business sites on IE11 right now, come on by. I literally have an entire row of engineers in the front that are super excited to help you debug on site. And we'll be there all day. So I'm going to leave this up. We have 4 mics in the room. Feel free to hop in queue, and if you have any questions, happy to answer. And thank you.
On one of the first slides, you showed the configure and manage are becoming the same now. Mm-hmm. I've always thought of them differently. We configure defaults for our users, but we don't enforce them. How will this allow us to say, like, hey, the web page is this by default, your home page, but feel free, you can make it anything you want. By default, we want you to have these settings, but hey, you're welcome to change them as you see fit.
So the question was, on one of the earlier slides, there was the combination of configuration and management. How can you set a home page, for example, not to be there as your default home page, but not sticky? The way MDM is set up, and the way group policies, the way we're configuring these policies, you will have the option to make, excuse me, right. You will have the option of making them sticky, specifically with MDM. And group policy, that's an interesting feedback point that actually Prem, who's one of our program managers that's helping drive our policy story for Spartan, for Microsoft Edge. I'm still trying to get that right. Might be able to speak to you a little bit closer. Prem?
To answer your question, that's definitely something we're looking at. We understand that there are certain configurations, like home pages specifically, you want to be able to set it and let your users change it after the fact. So that's certainly something that we want to provide you guys to be able to do. I guess the grouping is more to the point of the tools that you use. Instead of having to use 2 separate tools to do that, this will provide a way for you to do both of that using a single tool set. So
no, I like the single tool set. I just don't want to forget that there are lots of settings that we like to default, but there are many reasons that are, for whatever reason, that a person needs to override our settings.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's certainly something that we're looking through. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Another question?
I have a second question, if I can.
Sure. Then we'll work our way around the room. Go ahead.
The engine and the app are being updated independently. Is that the same on mobile, like a Windows Phone and as well, or?
Yes. So, but the engine and the app are updated separately. On phone, it's a little bit different in the sense that they're more so treated as a single package. So, sorry, the question was, on desktop, we have the app is updated separately via the store, or via the experience with any other enterprise app. And on desktop, the platform is updated via Windows Update or WSUS or WHOOP, or Windows Update for Business. On the phone, the packaging structure and the way the phone, from a technical standpoint, is slightly different. The approach is still the same. We'll still go through the same channels and have millions of users validating that functionality before we update it. But the phone is treated as a single package that pushes out.
Thank you.
Cheers. So we'll go front, back, and then come back to front.
For Edge, you've got it so that like the sub URLs and the folders will redirect into IE. Mm-hmm. Will that pass the session information, or is that going to open a new authenticated session?
That's something we're actively still working on to perfect that experience. And when this initial experience lights up in a flight, hopefully later this month, we'll love to get the feedback on how that works specifically for your enterprise.
Actually, what's your preference?
Yeah,
I'd like it to pass, be more integrated and visible to the end user.
It's great feedback, and we've heard that before, and it's something we are actively working on. So for those that didn't hear, the question was, as you fall back from Microsoft Edge to Internet Explorer 11, will session information pass between both browsers?
And the second piece is when you've got that compatibility mode and you're viewing a site in Edge, and there's like a piece, like say a SharePoint web part, that's on that compatibility list, will it try to render it inside Edge, or is it going to pull that entire page because the parent is in Edge and the piece is on the compatibility list?
That's a scenario we are aware of, and it's almost like full disclosure. So the question was, if you visit a site in Microsoft Edge. Wow, good morning. Visit a site in Microsoft Edge, and there's a web component that is on on the enterprise mode site list to launch in IE11. What will happen?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I believe the current experience is if you have an iframe. Is that the question?
Yeah.
I think the point here is if a site needs legacy, i.e. proprietary technology, you can put it on the list. Right now, we're just going to show that iframe with some text saying this site needs IE technology, at least so you can see that this portion of the site doesn't work, but the rest of the site does work. Going back to your last question, our current design actually doesn't share any state between Project Spartan, Microsoft Edge, and IE11. And I think we want to purposely keep that a little bit separate. So I think just to reduce sharing, like there's security risks and whatnot. In this case, you would likely just expose the top level domain. So you would want the whole end-to-end experience. So instead of transitioning later on in the process, you would want to transition as early as possible.
Okay.
But we would love to hear your feedback.
Yes.
Okay.
We're still building the feature, and as I mentioned, a preview of it will be available later in an upcoming flight, and we're definitively looking forward to your feedback because we want to make sure that we get this right. Gentleman in the back.
Coming from a company that uses multiple legacy applications, and we're just implementing IE11 and the enterprise site lists, is there any way, especially looking at Edge, to get that telemetry data of sites that are within your organization where end users are basically having to put the site in enterprise mode to make the management of that list easier, and then thus when going back into Edge,
No worries.
get that data back to a centralized server. I'm thinking something along the lines of like the Java Advanced Management Console, where you can set the runtime to send a UDP packet to a central server that allows you to whitelist the applets, because in 1.8 the applets won't run if they're not signed.
I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. The question is essentially, is there a way that I can collect telemetry information from my end users to understand what compatibility settings the site has requested, and then collecting that information back to influence my enterprise mode site list?
Yep.
So first and foremost, I want you to come to my session tomorrow. But
Okay.
the short answer is yes.
Okay.
We released a feature in November called Enterprise Site Discovery, which enables you to which IE11 is instrumented to collect that information. And at that point, write it to WMI. The import from XML that I showed earlier, last month we enabled the ability, 2 months ago, we enabled the ability to write to an XML file, which you can define, which you can then use the Siteless Manager and just import a set of XML files from multiple clients to build out that site list, which you can then use for enterprise mode, and also the fallback experience as well.
Okay, perfect. Now,
And-
I really do appreciate you guys working on this Edge stuff because when we first heard about it, we're like, oh no, this is going to be a pain from a large organization with a lot of legacy applications. So even the ability to launch Edge, we'll go back to IE11 from an Edge site is crucial
Yay, we
for
did
the end
something
user
great.
experience. So that's awesome.
So definitely appreciate the feedback. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., room N427. Please stop by.
Hi. The Edge app versus the engine updates. So the engine updates can be delivered via WSIS, SCCM. The app updates themselves, where is that content going to come from? And are we able to deliver the app update itself via Config Manager? We're primarily worried about content. So we have
Cheers.
40,000 workstations. Do they have to go to the internet, or where does that come from?
So the Microsoft Edge app itself works like any other app that ships, any other Windows 10 app. So I would encourage you to visit our sessions around the Enterprise Store and how that works and how we're doing app management. I don't want to speak out of turn, but there is some tight integration between SCCM and the Enterprise Store and that whole experience. But the key thing to keep in mind for Microsoft Edge is that it's treated as if it's a standard Windows 10 app. So the question was, sorry, I need to actually reverse that, but how do you manage app distribution for this distribution of this updates to Microsoft Edge and Windows 10? Key takeaway, treat it just like any other Windows 10 app and runs through that pipeline and that experience. Sure.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind there, and Dean mentioned this earlier, one thing to keep in mind is that the application itself just has features like the browsing buttons, Cortana integration.
Right.
If you're worried about compatibility, that's really coming from the web engine. So the fact that the web engine is being updated just as Trident is today through Windows Update gives you the opportunity to test that update for compatibility's sake before you deploy.
I guess from this perspective, it was more the content of where the app update itself is actually coming from. If it's a 50 meg binary but I can look into that, just from that perspective.
We want to make sure that we enable IT pros to have control of updates.
Yeah.
So there is a story there. I'm just don't have depth knowledge on it. I just know we take advantage of that, and that's it.
Okay, thanks.
Cheers. Sir?
Hi. Coming from a enterprise development background, I'm wondering, W3C standards compliance, and what does a developer have to worry about in terms of supporting both versions of the browsers now?
So the question is, coming from a W3C standard, what should a developer have to worry about in terms of supporting both browsers? Fred?
Yeah, I would suggest that today, Internet Explorer 11 is a lowest common denominator experience because it's consistent across Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10 desktops. So today, obviously you shouldn't be writing for a specific browser. You should be writing using feature detection and browser detection. But the fact is, IE11 has a lot of modern standards, HTML5, CSS3, SVG, WebGL, et cetera, et cetera. So if you treat IE11 as the lowest common denominator, think of Microsoft Edge as a superset of the features that are already in Internet Explorer 11. So it should be relatively easy, or easier, for you to write modern standards code that works on IE11 and then test that later on for Microsoft Edge as more and more of your user base migrate over to Windows 10 and start using the new browser.
So if it's working with IE11, for the most part, we shouldn't have to worry about getting it to work on Edge.
I spent 15 years of consulting, and it taught me to be cynical. But I would say that the standard support that we have in Internet Explorer 11 today is pretty good. So if you're treating Internet Explorer 11 as kind of the base experience, and make sure that the application that you write uses the standards that are already in IE11, think of Edge as a superset of standards.
Thank you.
Cheers. Gentleman back right.
In the presentation, you made a comment about removing the ability to add something to the user agent string. Can you expand on that? Because we do add specific things to the user agent string that are then leveraged by our applications to know that it's our machine that's accessing that application and to do something special. So if you remove that ability to touch the user agent string, it'll break that functionality in our apps.
Cheers. So the question was, using IEAK for our Internet Explorer 11 on Windows 10, we removed the ability to add or append, more specifically, strings to the user agent string for IE11.
That was just IEAK?
Yeah, we found that, so I've spent quite a bit of time debugging sites, and the user agent string is like one of this very important signal, because you're pretty much telling the web server what you are and the web server is sending content to you. And we found that like changing the values, and we've seen a lot of people do this in the past, actually breaks the browser a lot. So we're trying to lock down that behavior because we've seen a lot of mistakes where like different tokens were added. We see a lot of code that will look for like if MSIE, if certain patterns, and if you add a token that falls in that pattern, a lot of that code would break. So we actually recommend you don't use the user agent string. Instead, as Fred mentioned, do feature detection if you can. That's a better pattern, web pattern.
Right. So in case you don't know, there's this other group at Microsoft that writes this thing called ADFS. And in ADFS v3, they allow you to add a user agent string that then allows ADFS to do detection and do NTLM authentication so you get single sign-on for ADFS. If you take away that ability, you're going to break all the work that Sam and his team did, and it's going to affect all of us who have done single sign-on for ADFS.
Yeah, so we can follow offline, but in Microsoft Edge, for example, there's no capability to change the user agent string, and we think that's the right pattern going forward. We've been saying, please don't use capability detection through the user agent string for a very long time, because you can imagine this string is being sent for every single web request. There's a performance impact, there's a network impact, sharding impact, there's CDNs around the world that use different, look at the user agent string. So there's a huge impact of changing that. Now I understand as a corporation, you're not dealing with the same level of like global issues. It's more local to your environment. We can take that offline, but I think we want to move away from that pattern if possible.
It's just a problem when one part of Microsoft says, do this, it'll give you a great user experience. We've done that for the last 2 years. And now another part of Microsoft with Windows 10 says, we're going to break all of that user experience that you just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building. That's really a problem for enterprises that have 300,000 seats.
Yes, I would love to see what breaks and how we can fix that. Our goal with enterprise
I can
mode,
show you.
yeah, but it's definitely a pattern we're trying to move away. We've been talking about this for many releases and helping other partner teams move away. So I'd love to talk to that Microsoft team as well and help them move forward. Thanks.
So
And we do have office hours Thursday from 11 to 5, which I would love to debug some of those apps.
Yep. Gentleman in the red shirt.
Yeah, this might be a touch off topic, but you're talking about the same management experience in Windows 10 with IE 11. Should we also expect the same browser experience for the end user? Because for us, the management's the small part of it. The biggest part is actually getting the stuff tested and getting the users to sign off. So should we expect to see the exact same browser experience if we move from 7 or 8 into 10 and not have to worry about any of those idiosyncrasies between OSs?
So the question was, can you expect to see the same browsing experience from 7 to 8 to 10 on Windows 10? In Internet Explorer 11, you will.
Okay.
Full stop and period. It is the exact same browser shipping on all three versions, all three of our OSs and whatever respective server flavors it ships on. Management experience for that is also completely consistent. Microsoft Edge is a brand new browser.
Right.
With that's a
Edge
new
is different.
experience. But for Internet Explorer 11, it's completely consistent.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheers. Sir?
Can you explain a little bit the differences between an add-on inside of Internet Explorer 11 versus an extension in Microsoft Edge, and how we're going to avoid getting back into that same boat of all these custom add-ons from these companies that break the browsing experience and slow everything down and just basically make it a craptastic product?
So the question was, I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
Yeah, no worries.
What is the add-on story for Microsoft Edge versus Internet 11, and how are we hoping to avoid add-on creep?
Yeah.
Like 50 different add-ons loading.
Exactly.
Yeah, but part of this is the legacy of binary extensions. Yeah. So binary extensions in Internet Explorer, if you think about this, Internet Explorer this August has been shipping for 20 years. So customers had asked us for a lot of functionality that really didn't exist as a web standard. It was Wild West back then. We introduced functionality like ActiveX controls with absolutely the best of intentions in response to customer inquiry. And it provided some great functionality that didn't exist in the browser, and frankly still doesn't exist in the browser. But it came at a cost. There's always a trade-off between risk and functionality. So we gave some great functionality, but these ActiveX controls have, in some cases, unfettered access to the operating system. So some of these binary controls, ActiveX, Java, etc., haven't always been the source of all goodness over the years. They haven't played well with the operating system. There's a lot of malicious software out there that takes advantage of that access. One of the things we're doing in Microsoft Edge is we have no binary extensions, period. So, thank you. Exactly. We have very constrained JavaScript and HTML extensions, and that's the model that other browsers are moving to as well, for exactly the same reason. So if you need Java, and we do have Flash built into the browser, we do have PDF viewer built into the browser, but we don't support binary extensions, we don't support ActiveX controls. If you need that legacy technology, you can fall back to Internet Explorer 11. Now the nice thing about having a list, an allow list, that falls back to Internet Explorer 11 gracefully is you can use a least privileged security model. And you can say, for surfing the public web, I'm going to use Microsoft Edge only for the sites that need Java, only for the sites that need ActiveX controls am I going to fall back to IE 11. So you can constrain how your users access those older binaries. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Right. Sir?
Yeah, so we need that tool you guys are going to put out in November sooner. So the other big issue that we're facing, of course, is too many different web applications that are legacy and outsourced providers providing support, or if that's what you want to call it. So they're very slow or reluctant to make any changes to change the header tags on the web servers for compatibility view. So we're forced to have to fix this problem in 30,000 places instead of the app itself. But what I'm wondering is, the fit between compatibility view mode in our group policies versus the enterprise mode solution. Chris Jackson yesterday said, yeah, you really shouldn't have to do too much with enterprise mode right away. You can just swing over to IE 11, right? And we still carry over your compatibility view list. And I'm still a little foggy on how that relationship works and what things you should keep maintaining in compatibility view versus when you should swing over to enterprise mode, or do they complement each other?
Yeah, it's a great point. So there's a lot of confusion between compatibility view and enterprise mode. This is a session that Dean and I are presenting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But I'll give you the short version, and that's that compatibility view has been around for a long time. Compatibility view is basically a switch between either IE7 document mode, if there's a doc type, or IE5 document mode, if there isn't a doc type. You can use enterprise mode enterprise mode is higher fidelity emulation for IE8. You can use enterprise mode with compatibility view. And tomorrow we'll walk you through why it's a good idea to test your document modes first and then fall back to enterprise mode. Short hint, performance and potentially security. But yeah, we'll go through this in a lot of detail tomorrow. If you can't make tomorrow's session at 9 a.m., it will be recorded and available for streaming. Yes. So the short answer to the question is, can I force a site to use a particular document mode? The answer is yes. Part of the feature that we released last November was to give you the ability to put any site in any document mode without changing a single line of code on the site. And here's the kicker. It overrides what the site itself is asking for. Because there are a lot of sites out there that say they think they want IE8 mode, or they think they want IE9 mode or IE10 mode or what we used to call Edge mode, and they don't actually work in that mode. So I'm an IT pro. I'm not a developer. I don't want to crack open a website if I can avoid it. But now we have the management tools to be able to just add a line of code that adds that domain in a particular mode, and it overrides whatever the site itself is asking for. So yes. And that's only for IE 11? That's only for IE 11. Specifically, yeah, and Edge will, Microsoft Edge will fall back to IE 11 and respect that document mode.
Yep. Come by tomorrow. Gentleman in the back.
I have two questions. What about, I didn't see anything in the group policy for redirecting favorites, and what about, how are the favorites in Edge? Are they shared among IE? Are we going to have two separate favorite folders to manage and back up? What's the strategy there?
So the question was around favorites. Are favorites redirected between Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge? Prem?
So favorites, we are making the migration experience as easy as possible during upgrades. So your favorites that's available in IE, Internet Explorer, would be available in Microsoft Edge. Right now, favorites. So, and another thing that's a very high goal for us is to have a very consistent experience in all devices that Microsoft Edge is running. This includes potentially having your favorites in other devices as well. That's something that we are actively looking at. So it'll be definitely supported in an upcoming update for Microsoft Edge. From a manageability perspective, that is definitely in our pipeline. If you saw the ones in the future consideration, that's one of our chief goals. And we would definitely love to hear your feedback or your inputs about how favorites are being used in your enterprise environment, so we can tailor the experience if possible, where possible. So it's definitely under consideration. It's not in the list for RTEM this summer, but it will be supported soon after.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
And then my other question was, is there a reverse compatibility list? Meaning, if I'm in Edge and I go to a compatibility list site, I see it popped up a brand new window of IE with my compatibility list site on there. If I go to that address bar and type in a non-compatibility list site, does it go back to the Edge browser, or do I now just stick in IE the rest of my day?
Yeah, we don't currently have that feature, but if it's something that you think is valuable for you, please let us know, because we do want to prioritize the features accordingly. Yeah, so it's not in, keep in mind, this is a product that's evolving over time. What we're showing you is a preview.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial to have, or to be able to at least place IE in the mode optionally of only use IE 11 for these sites. Everything else goes to the default browser.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that feedback came through loud and clear.
Well said, well said. Gentleman in blue shirt.
So I had a question about the enterprise mode. When you set a site that might be like deep inside of like behind a login to be loaded like a certain different document type or compatibility today in IE11 in Edge when that says, oh, I need IE11, if you're not passing anything by, you would have lost the whole connection for where you were after the login, right?
So what I'm hearing is effectively authentication pass through.
Yeah. So in IE11 today, you log in, you might go through several layers of a site, and then you need enterprise mode turned on. If that falls back to IE11, you would have to step the whole way through.
So the short-term guidance, given that you have the control using the enterprise mode site list, you do have the ability to put that entire authentication chain into the site list, so that when you go to that first site and then it bounces out to your federated authentication page and then bounces through whatever hoops that it needs to get to before it actually gets to the content. That entire site chain or even the top level domain itself could be put into enterprise mode to pop up in IE11. That way, when you start, you always start in IE11.
But the user would have to log in again, though, correct? Because
the nuance here is that putting this entire redirect chain onto the enterprise mode site list and notating it for IE11 would be before the user even logs in.
Okay.
So the login experience and everything would actually happen in IE11 versus happening in Microsoft Edge.
Okay.
So I tend to think about this as you have some options in front of you, right? One option is you could move to Windows 10 and just standardize on Internet Explorer 11. You've already moved to IE11 on Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. Staying on IE11 could be the fastest web path to Windows 10. And in that case, no change. It's exactly what your users are experiencing today in a Windows 7 or Windows 8.1 environment. The next step is you could use Microsoft Edge and fall back to Internet Explorer 11 for everything on your intranet. That's one of the things that Dean mentioned is we will have a policy so it will fire off Internet Explorer 11 for everything on your intranet, in addition to your enterprise mode site list.
That's really hard. As a university, we have a lot of like Blackboard and a lot of things that are student-facing that are very, very forward as far as compatibility, and then you have all the line of business stuff. So the intranet doesn't really 100% work.
Yeah, the other options are obviously enterprise mode, as Dean mentioned. We also have a public-facing compatibility view list. So this is the Microsoft managed compatibility view list that we've had for years. Now it's doing double duty by adding in a list of sites that need older document modes and can fire off Internet Explorer 11. So it may be worth talking about your scenario offline, because I'd love to learn more about what proportion of machines you're using are managed versus unmanaged, and how you help control that environment.
Okay. Cheers.
Great
T-shirt, by the way.
Oh yeah, great one. So we use the enterprise site mode list currently, and I mean we started using the compat list years ago with like IE 8 and 9, and what we found, just to kind of go back to what someone was asking, is some of the sites work with just the compat mode alone. When enterprise mode came along, we had to put them there too. Some of them just work fine in enterprise mode site list. And so that's worked for us to kind of because we're a big enterprise and have a lot of line of business apps. The question I had was, we also set it up so that when users would put a site in enterprise mode, it would kind of send it to a web page, and that would kind of get logged, and then we could view that kind of with a Splunk tool or whatever. Is that still supported, or is that supported going forward to collect that information?
Two different things, and we'll go in reverse order. What is the enterprise mode phone home, enterprise mode reporting functionality when an end user manually puts a site into enterprise mode? Does that post-message functionality still exist? So short answer is yes. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow some more at the 9 a.m. session. The second question I had comes back to the CV list versus, a site on the compatibility review list versus a site on the site on the enterprise mode list. That's some feedback that we heard before, and we recently introduced IE7 enterprise mode, which starts to address some of that. And we'll be going in depth tomorrow during the enterprise mode session around how the story all fits together. Because we want to make sure it's as clear as possible and to reduce any confusion within this story.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Cheers. And young lady in the back.
So we just went to IE11 the last couple weeks, and we were using the enterprise management site list. We don't manage all of our customer sites. We only manage the 80% rule. And so our users are managing their own. And what we found is a lot of them still need the compatibility, like people were saying, but there's some users who have been asking us to put in their site in the site mode list because it uses document mode. How can, other than having the user hit F12 and changing the IE session in F12, how can you have the user change from Edge to IE11 to IE8 so they can test when we are not managing that specific site?
Go ahead.
So the short answer is that is what we recommend today. Because the F12 developer tools give you the most flexibility in terms of what you can test. Now, the bad news is obviously there's a little bit of user training there.
And our users are to us, the F12 is not an option for our users.
Okay. So there are a couple of things. One is we tried to make it easy by having an enterprise mode option from the tools menu.
Yes, when that does not work, though.
But what we found was that doesn't work all the time. Exactly.
Yes.
So in response to customer feedback telling us we need more granular control, we have that available within F12. One potential solution that we've been thinking about, and I'd love to get your feedback on this, is there used to be IE8 era plugins that would let you choose a document mode from your toolbar, essentially. Eric Lawrence wrote one of these years and years and years ago, for example. We've been thinking about updating tools like that as a plugin just for testing purposes. If you think this would be useful to you, let us know, and it's something that we can investigate. But frankly, we haven't gone down that road because the F12 developer tools generally are okay for most semi-technical users, but I see your point.
None of our users are technical. They're all field users that don't ever use the internet, and so they don't even know what F12 is.
Yeah, that's great feedback. By the way, we've updated F12 to we realized a lot of customers go to F12, emulation tab, find the drop-down, and that was probably one of the most used feature, commonly used features. So we've actually added it to the menu item. I wonder if that helps a little bit.
Adding it to the menu would be great because when our users see developer, they think, oh, I'm messing with the website, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
So that's when it causes a lot of service desk calls.
Okay, we should follow offline, but right now we have in IE11, if you go to F12, in the top menu, there's just a drop
down. Oh yeah, there's a drop down. Oh yeah. Yeah, we know.
Yeah, the balance we're obviously trying to take is when we had a little broken page icon for compatibility view, the feedback we got from a lot of you was, my users are stepping on themselves constantly. You know, it's too easy. They're clicking on the little icon. They're getting in compatibility view. You had to train your help desks to ask, all right, let's go into compatibility view. Let's figure out what mode your site is actually being rendered in. It was a pain. So that's why we tried to make it a little more difficult for customers to use enterprise mode or turn it on by at least putting it on the tools menu, you know, security through obscurity. But there's a balance there. So if there's a better way of doing this, maybe deploying this toolbar or an easier way of choosing the menu, especially for customers who are testing an application, let's follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
No. The question was, didn't I just say that enterprise mode overrode what the site itself is asking for? That's absolutely true. What I'm saying is for testing purposes, where you want to try IE11 mode, IE10 document mode, IE9, IE8, IE7, IE5, IE8 enterprise mode, IE7 enterprise mode, there may be an easier way than going into the F12 developer tools and rooting around a little bit in there. And I understand your point.
Yep.
Next point?
It's actually the gentleman back here.
Oh, sorry.
And just we have about 5 minutes left in the session. I do want to be respectful of your time. But if we don't get to your question, my engineering team will I will either be up front or outside the room to answer any other questions. Sir?
2 questions, if I may. A little healthy pessimism aside. So if an application works in IE11 without any compatibility mode, any enterprise mode, the expectation is it's going to work in Edge on Windows 10.
The question is, without any pessimism aside, if an app works in IE11 without in Edge document mode in IE11, will it work on Microsoft Edge? It should.
It should.
Yes.
Okay. And then is Microsoft doing anything with third-party suppliers like Oracle, SAP, PTC in order to be able to move away from the whole add-in thing?
Right. So the question is, are we working with third-party ISVs to help them get ready for the future of our browser? Short answer is yes. We have regular engagements with a lot of your major line of business ISVs, not to mention any names, but you can think about, pick your top 10. We're working with them regularly. They're aware of our plans. They're aware of how we're pushing the web and pushing our browser forward, and working with them to make sure they're ready for it. And we're ready for them as well.
The good news, obviously, is if you have legacy line of business applications that use those older technologies, you still have IE11. IE11 is still a good browser today.
Sir? In front. Got a few minutes.
So one of the questions you had up there that she kind of answered was why 2 browsers? The reality in my world, though, is that I'm going to have Windows 7 for at least the next 3 years.
Okay.
So the question for me is why 3 browsers? Because I need that modern functionality. I need that rapidly updated browser for today's internet. And unless I have, and currently it's either Firefox or Chrome, unless I get that functionality put back into Windows 7, something like Edge, I don't see, from my perspective, why I would use Edge in Windows 10. That's just another browser that I have to support. When, I'm going to have Chrome in 7, I'm just going to put Chrome in 10, and I'm going to use IE11.
Yeah, I think a lot of you felt some pain when you were using Internet Explorer 8 in particular. Because for legacy line of business applications, you were using Internet Explorer 8. At the same time, you needed a browser for modern websites. So many of you turned to a 2-browser solution in the not too distant past for that reason. Internet Explorer 11 is something new in that we have some customers who have moved to IE11 and done away with their other modern browser. Because Internet Explorer 11 does have pretty good support today for HTML5, CSS3, WebGL, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as time goes by, you're absolutely right. We've said that most of our forward-looking development is going into our Microsoft Edge browser on Windows 10. But we do listen to customer feedback. So I would suggest that if you are on IE11 now, look into it, see if a 1-browser solution makes sense for you. I have had customers tell me that they were able to do away with a second browser and save millions of dollars in management costs and support costs by going to a single browser solution. But if you feel like over time you're being forced back into a two-browser solution and that second browser is not going to be Microsoft Edge, please let us know loud and clear, because these are discussions that we have internally on the browser strategy that we should be pursuing over the next few years. And as you can imagine, there is some debate internally about what the right thing to do is. So I think that will change over time as we get more and more feedback from customers like yourself.
And the other question that I had was around mobility and mobile devices. So is there any thought of cross-platform Edge across different iOS and Android? And
our focus right now is to create the best browsing experience possible on Windows 10. But that's something we also evaluate from time to time.
Cheers.
So right now we're focused on having a great browser on Windows 10, and then later I think we're going to look both at what we for down level, Windows 7 or Windows 8.1 customer, and what we can do across platforms. But nothing to announce at this time. Our focus today is on Windows 10.
So we're actually at time, so sir, happy to grab you on the way out. But I do want to thank everybody for attending this session. I'm a glutton for feedback, so if you haven't done so already, please use the app, submit feedback on the session. This is how we can make sure we're delivering the right content at the right level and making sure we're addressing any concerns. Yeah, thanks for coming out. Enjoy the rest of the session, the conference.